we would begin the trip from the start, how we choose our journal. At first, you must look to your project and your intended audience. One time I submitted a paper about spinal shortening to International Orthopedics. And the chief editor sent me the rejection on the second day and sent me clear sentence. This is out of the scope of the journal. I don't understand what do you mean by spinal shortening. This is my mistake and I shouldn't do it again. And also, you are joining a conversation between you and the editorial board, reviewer, and then the readers. So this conversation might be using the same language. How we would choose the journal? There are key considerations, including the age of the journal, the scope, as I just said, the size and the audience, the impact of the journal, the editorial board, the publishing model, and peer review, and the rejection rate. And when you look to the journal before submission, you must check some of the papers in the journal. I look to several important points: submission date and acceptance date. Look to these two dates very important, very carefully. Some journals you find submitted in February 2017 and accepted July 2020. This means that this journal reviewed the paper for 3 years. One of my papers rejected from American Journal after 2 years of revision. After 2 years, in these 2 years, we reviewed the paper 3 times, and finally we got rejection. One of the journal rejected one of my papers after 9 months review. It also was American Journal. So look to very carefully to the submission date and to the acceptance date. And then, as I said, look to the aims and the scope of the journal. Is this going with your research or not? Preparing your manuscript, there are some basic tips. Write first and edit later. Don't begin by the most fascinating text, but begin by rough version and then modify it later on. And keep it simple. Complicated ideas expressed plainly. So we keep the space between the lines and avoid passive sentence construction and put the paragraphs. And this is one of the common mistakes. When you finish the paragraph, you finish an idea. Go to another paragraph, you are going to another idea. Don't mix between the paragraphs and between the ideas. And the flow of idea is very important. It must be logic. Don't go front and then go back. For example, speaking about the incidence of a disease and the lines of treatment, and coming back in the next paragraph to speak to me about the incidence again, or about the cause. Once you went to the treatment point, you have finished all the previous points. The paragraphs must go in sequence. The paper structure must be respected. This is written in the aims and scope page, and it is introduction. And one of the most important points for rejection of paper is the introduction, because the authors did not convince the reviewers about the importance of the problem. You must explain in the introduction that the problem is very important. It will affect the practice of the spine. And so the reviewer will think, yes, this paper is very important because the problem is big. You must be clear in this point. The question and the problem, the thesis, hypothesis, and arguments. The research question. The research question must be well constructed, must be clear, with time limited, and then explain what is the roadmap you will use for getting your answer for your question. The method, theory, results, discussion, and conclusion. The title is very important. This is very important point, and write it after you finish all items of the paper, just before the abstract. This is short and to the point. Avoid redundancy and highlight the findings, not the process. And this is a common mistake. Giving me the methodology, but don't give me the result of the paper. And stands out creatively and include specific words that capture the subject of your article. Writing an abstract is very important because If you will check your email, you will find emails from different journals, including some topics. All of us will review the abstracts, and the abstract will tell you if I will go to read this paper or I will not go. So the abstract is very important. Write the paper first, and the abstract is a review. Check the journal, the requirements, the words limit. Don't spend your words in writing some terms like focus on the essential information. The word count is important. Revise every time you revise a paper. Sometimes I receive a paper, the conclusion in the abstract is different than the conclusion at the end of the paper. This is a great mistake, and this is not good. And check the language. The abstract must point to why is this research important? What is the problem you are trying to solve? Your argument and hypothesis and methods and results, and then conclusion. Then write few keywords. The keywords will be directing the researcher for your research, and be specific. For example, if I will write in my keywords fusion, this will give thousands of papers, but I will write olive, this will give limited number. If the methods or the techniques are relevant, include in the keywords. Test your keywords before you submitting your paper, and search and how much papers you will have with your search. The references are very important. In the journal style, must be updated. Sometimes I have a paper with the most recent reference 5 years ago. This is not good. They must be updated. And don't neglect important references. One of the papers rejected from the Spine editor recently because the authors did not mention a very important reference, including some cases related to his point. I found this when I was reviewing the paper, and the editor rejected the paper, the manuscript, because of this point. Sufficient, but not so much. If the references are more than needed, it is not good. Take time to review the instructions for the authors, and you must respect the publication ethics. There are some points we must respect: the authorship, competing interests, duplicate submission, data or image fabrications, and plagiarism and breaches of copyright. Who should be an author on the paper? Who does all these points? Substantial contribution to conception or design of the work, drafting the work, final approval of the published version, agreement to be accountable for all aspects of the work. All these points must be done by and respected by all authors. Take care of duplicate submission. For interesting point, I received a paper recently from 2 journals, the same paper, the same data, and submitted to different journals. This is not good, because if I will write this to the editor, this author will be put in the blacklist. Authors make declaration upon submission that the content is original and has not been submitted. Multiple pre-submission queries are okay. The plagiarism is important. The appropriation of another person or group's ideas, results, or words without giving appropriate credit. Includes contents from the books and from websites. Before you submit, look at the published papers, review the aim and scope of the journal, follow the instructions for authors, format your article according to the journal, explain any abbreviations, and review the submission process. And consider English polish. Before start, make sure you have the following points: all the manuscript files, permission to use images, email addresses and names of all co-authors, agreement with co-authors on publishing choices and responsibilities, the correct version of the paper. When you receive the reviewer comments, don't be disheartened. Carefully read the decision letter, consult your co-authors, and break down the comments and make all of the suggested corrections. And if reviewer misunderstood something, review your explanation. Very rarely that you should say to the reviewer, I disagree with you. In that case, you must say and send the references for disagreement with the reviewer. Make it easy to the administration. Be professional, and remember, the reviewers are trying to help you. If the paper is rejected, move on the next journal on your list. Remember to treat it as an entirely new submission. Follow the rules of the new journal and make sure of reviewers. Any mistake should be corrected before you are going to the second choice. The top reasons of rejection are listed here. I'm sorry, I must finish now. If the paper is accepted, keep in contact with the journal production. Correct any mistake. It is not good to find paper published in bone and joint and full of mistakes. This means that the authors did not review the proof carefully. Don't be afraid to ask any question. So my summary is, read carefully the aims and the scope of the journal. Consider the paper structure. Title is very important. Abstract is the last to be written. Respond point by point to the editorial or reviewer comments, and don't be frustrated if rejected. Try again. Consider important comments of the reviewers. Thank you.